My name is Andrew. Anders and I see each other about once a week at our Tuesday meetings where we plan sermons together. I serve at a church called Mount Hope in Belmont. I lead that congregation there, and I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share with you from God's Word this morning. Before we get into that, I have a question. I wonder if there's anybody in here, maybe you can remember when you were a kid, or maybe you have children that are in sort of this phase right now where you play pretend. Anybody have like just a quick show of hands, you played pretend, you have kids that play pretend. This is great, as a little kid, this is a great way to just get some energy out, use your imagination, give the parents a break for a few minutes. And so when I was a kid, I don't know if we have there it is, boom. I had a very elaborate game. This is me, by the way. I maintained my dashing good looks from when I was so young. Somebody outside said that I looked like 14, so maybe this photo was taken like 5 years ago, you never know. But I would play pretend with my friend Hallie, and we had this very elaborate game, very complicated, lots of rules, and we called it People, just so nobody would get confused. And I would wake up, we would be a dad and a mom, and I had a part-time job as a construction worker there working on my tools. My other part-time job was a superhero. And so I would get up in the morning, go off to work, save the city, fix some bookshelves, whatever it was. And while I was gone, Hallie would, clean the house and make a meal, and I would come home and we would have dinner together and conversations. And, I know that maybe those traditional gender roles aren't really in fashion anymore, but you gotta cut me some slack because I was like 4 or 5 years old. But isn't it true that as we grow up, as we get older, we reach adolescence, we start to hit that awkward stage in school, and we want to fit in, and we want these different things out of life. Pretending starts to take on a different meaning. It starts to take on a different place in our minds, where we learn over time that we can pretend to sort of be somebody in order to get things that we want. If we want to be accepted, we can pretend to be a version of ourselves or a person that we think would be accepted, and hopefully through that pretending, we can get what we want. And the story that we're going to look at today from the book of Genesis is probably the most ridiculous episode in the Bible of pretending in the whole Bible. If there was an award for the most ridiculous pretending or the most ridiculous disguise, it would go to this chapter hands down. So if you have your Bibles with you, we're gonna be in the book of Genesis chapter 27. Now, from what I understand, Anders sort of jumped over this passage just for me, and I thank him dearly for that. And we're gonna look at is a story from the life of Jacob. But as you turn to Genesis 27, if you have your Bibles with you, we also have the verses on the screen. I want to set the stage. Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob's parents, they have been desperately trying to have a child for 20 years. They've been praying and doing whatever they could think of, trying to have a child. It's been 20 years, and God finally answers their prayers, and Rebekah becomes pregnant. And they're so excited, they're overjoyed, they're elated, but very quickly the joy of that moment starts to be overshadowed by painful episodes that Rebekah is having as this baby develops in her womb. And she doesn't understand. God, you gave me this blessing, you gave me this pregnancy, what's going on? And so she seeks God, and a prophet tells her 3 things. God speaks to her, he says 3 things to her. He says, first thing, Rebekah, the main reason that you are experiencing this pain is because you're not just carrying one child, you actually have twins right now. And those twins are sort of jostling inside you, because when they grow up, this is the second thing that she learns, that when those children grow up, they're gonna grow up into great nations, but they're gonna be in conflict with each other. This pregnancy is sort of gonna be a sort of defining characteristic of their life. They're gonna be in conflict as they grow up. And the third thing that she learns, that God says to her about her pregnancy, Rebekah learns that the older will serve the younger. The older will serve the younger. This is completely opposite of everything that they understood at the time. For Rebekah to hear this message from God would be to turn her whole worldview on its head. The oldest son is always the master. The oldest son is going to get the lion's share of the inheritance when the father passes away. The oldest son is going to be, the one who moves into the role of patriarch after the father, after Isaac passes away. The oldest son. It was always the oldest son. And so as a father in this day and age, as a father, you would just shower your oldest son with love. You want to give everything you've got as a dad into your oldest son because you know that one day he's going to have to take your place. And Rebekah finds this word from the Lord that the older is actually going to serve the younger. The younger son is going to be the one to rise up into this position. And what we see is, right before we turn to this passage, is that the boys grow up and things go off the rails really fast. The parents, it says in Genesis 25, the parents pick favorites. And it's no surprise that Isaac would pick his oldest son, Esau, to be his favorite child. Rebekah, maybe because she hears this word from the Lord, but she picks her youngest son, Jacob, and she loves Jacob. And so the boys grow up, and we pick up Genesis chapter 27, it's been 40 years. So the boys they're grown, they're adults, and this is where we are in Genesis 27. Verse 1, it says, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son. Here I am, he answered. And Isaac said, now I am an old man and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die. Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock, bring me 2 choice young goats so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat so that he may give you his blessing before he dies. Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, but my brother Esau, he's a hairy man, and I'm a man with smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him, and I would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing. His mother said to him, my son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get him for me. So he went and he got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which he had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. Then she handed to her son the tasty food and the bread she had made. Now let's pause there for a second. What we see right off the bat in this story is that this is a deeply dysfunctional family. This family has a lot of problems. Now, it can be kind of tough to see at first glance, but Isaac is doing something that he is not supposed to be doing. What Isaac does, because Isaac loves his son Esau, knowing the prophecy that God gave 40 years ago, he calls him in, just Esau. He calls him in and he says, you know that tasty food that I like? This is the fastest way. If you're ever wondering how to get to a man's heart, it's his stomach. Isaac says, make me some of that food that I like. You know that food that I love. Can you just make me some? Because I want to give you my blessing before I die. And this is a really serious, deeply meaningful blessing that Isaac is referring to. We don't really have a modern equivalent. The closest thing is like a last will and testament, but more of a spiritual version, right? So normally what would happen, if Isaac was going to do it by the book, if Isaac was going to do it the way that God wanted, and if you want to see an example of it done right, we're not going to get there, but you can go to Genesis 49, and you'll see how it's supposed to be done. But the father, when he senses that his life is coming to an end, he would call all of his sons into the room, sort of stack them up, oldest to youngest, and one by one go down the line and give them this sort of prophetic, sort of spiritual blessing. So the blessing would sometimes, come along with sort of material things, but the point of the blessing was, it was spiritual, and it was deeply, deeply connected to the identity of the son. And we know in these times that the names that children were given were also names that were deeply wrapped up in their identity. And so we see this son Esau, who's born first, and he gets this name Esau because two things. He comes out all red when he's born, and he comes out covered in hair. I have no idea what's going on there. But they give him the name Esau because that's a word that sort of sounds like red and hairy. And then Jacob comes out after, and when Jacob comes out of the womb, he's sort of reaching out for his brother's heel. And so they give him this name Jacob, which means grasps at the heel, which is also sort of a phrase which means he's sort of a trickster, like a little deceitful kind of person. But as a father, watching your sons grow up, watching them mature and seeing everything that happens in their life, you are in the perfect place to give them a blessing because you can see deeply into their heart. And the children are like, this is one of the things that on the top of their list. This is one of the things that they are so desperate for. That my father sees me, he knows who I am, and he's gonna give me a blessing based on my identity, based on who I am. But Isaac sort of bucks the whole tradition. He calls his son Esau, you get the sense that there's sort of something sneaky going on. He says, go out, get some food, bring it back. I'm gonna bless you. We're gonna cut Jacob out. I'm gonna give you the whole blessing. And Rebecca overhears this. It doesn't say if she's being sneaky or what, but there's so much problem happening in this family. You don't know if she's just sort of listening in or she just overheard. But she's distraught. Her favorite son is about to get cut out of this blessing. Not only that, but if this blessing sort of goes through the way Isaac plans it, then it sort of throws into question this prophecy that God gave to them when they were born. And so she's like, what can I do? Isaac is the patriarch. Isaac is the father of the family. He's got all the power. He's got all the leverage. I can't go in there and say, hey, you can't do that. You have to bless Jacob too. He can do whatever he wants. So what can I do? I have to find a way to trick him. He's gonna try and, pull a fast one on us. Well, we're gonna return the favor. And she knows at the end of Genesis 25, when the boys grow up, it says very specifically that Esau became a skilled hunter. And so his mother knows that she may not have a lot of time to come up with a plan to get the blessing back. And so Esau goes into the field, he gets his bow and arrow, and she's like, what can we do? The only thing she can think of is Isaac wants to bless Esau. So if I can convince Isaac that Jacob is Esau, maybe, just maybe, Jacob can get the blessing instead. And so she comes up with this. Honestly, if you think about it, it's a horrible disguise. It's absurd, right? First thing she does is she gets a meal of goat meat to make for Isaac. Now, most likely the animal that Esau is gonna be bringing back is a deer. And I've not had goat before, but I have had deer, and deer's got a pretty unique taste to it. Right? So she, already off the bat, she's like, I gotta spice this up somehow to make it just seem like it could be deer. And the second thing is she takes the goat skins and just puts it on his hands and on his neck to try and make him seem hairy. I'm not that hairy, but that's gotta be pretty ridiculous, right? Like, who's gonna be convinced that a goat skin is actually just human hair? And the third thing she does is she takes Esau's cloak, a garment from the house, his best robe, and she puts it on her son, which is also a very far cry from what the real Esau is going to be when he comes back in from hunting, because when you hunt with a bow and arrow, you have to go out into the wilderness where there are wild animals. You have to lie in wait for one to come. You have to shoot it. A bow does not kill an animal instantly. So that deer's gonna get hit and it's gonna take off running, and you just have to chase after it until it collapses. Pick up the carcass, put it onto your shoulders, and walk it back home. And so Esau is gonna come in from the field very sweaty, very smelly, and probably bloody on his robe. And so this is a terrible disguise. This is a terrible episode of playing pretend, but this is all they can come up with on short notice. And so we pick it up. This is the moment of truth. Verse 18, Jacob went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "I am," he replied. Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him and he ate, and he brought some wine and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So when he went to him and kissed him, and Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "The smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." Somehow, this is crazy. Somehow the plan works. Somehow this awful disguise fools Isaac into giving the blessing. You know when they say when somebody loses one of their senses, like they go blind or they go deaf, supposedly your other senses are supposed to get a lot sharper? Not the case. Not the case here. Isaac goes blind, and he can't tell the difference between goat skin and human hair, and he can't tell the difference between goat meat and deer meat, and he can't tell the difference between a clean washed garment from the house and a worn garment that was used out while someone was hunting. It seems like Isaac was a little dubious, right? He's doing all these different little tests just to check because the voice sounds wrong. But eventually he does believe that it's Esau before him, and he gives the blessing. And you can see the blessing. He doesn't hold anything back. He's gonna make him Lord over all his brothers. He's gonna give, he's sort of prophetically saying God is gonna bless you with all sorts of material blessings. And I wonder that, why, if he had any doubts, if Isaac had any doubts about who it was before him, he didn't call somebody in to double check. And I think maybe it could have been that he genuinely in his heart wanted to believe that it was Esau, right? Because this is his favorite son. He really wanted to set Esau up for success, that he didn't bother double checking. Maybe it was just because he knew he was doing something wrong and he was so ashamed. He couldn't bear to invite a servant in. The servant would be like, "What is going on here?" Or let alone his wife, Rebecca, to double check that this was Esau or not. Nonetheless, Isaac gives the blessing. Isaac blesses Jacob, the younger son, the blessing that he wanted to give to the firstborn, the blessing that was supposed to go to the oldest son. And in this here, we see the full lengths that Jacob is willing to go to in order to get this blessing, right? They were, as boys, desperate for their father's love, especially Jacob, who didn't really experience the father's love his life because Isaac loved Esau, desperately wanting to get this blessing. And so he's willing to do whatever it takes, to go to whatever lengths in order to secure that blessing. He is willing to completely sort of eschew his identity. He's willing to completely to give up who he is. It is a huge deal for him to say, "I am Esau, your firstborn. That's not him just saying, I'm gonna put on a disguise and pretend to be Esau on the outside. For him to say, I am Esau, is for him almost to take away all the things that were inside of him that made him Jacob and say, those are meaningless to me. Whatever is Jacob is meaningless to me in comparison to getting the blessing. I want the blessing, so I'm gonna pretend to be somebody I'm not. That's one thing, but it's a whole nother step. You see what he does next? He makes God an accomplice. He turns God into an accomplice in this elaborate ruse to convince his father. He says, when Isaac asked him, how did you get this so fast? It was like 20 minutes ago, like I just asked you to go out. And he says, this is sort of the trump card. I don't have to explain myself. The Lord your God gave me success. So he makes God complicit in this lie that he is using to try and manipulate his father into the blessing. The blessing was so important to Jacob. The most important thing, the only thing he could think of, it was this sort of thing. You ever felt like this desperate that the end would justify the means? Whatever it was that was so important to you, you would be willing to lie, to cheat. This is church, so maybe we're not brave enough to admit it, but I've been there before. That whatever it takes to get this, it'll be worth it in the end. And that's where Jacob is at. And he's got the blessing. The blessing for him represents security. It represents his whole future taken care of. Jacob got the blessing. For him, it's like happily ever after, roll the credits, I'm good. All my striving, I got what I wanted, and I'm set. I can rest. But maybe unsurprisingly, that is not how the story ends. So let's finish it here together, starting verse 30. After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, my father, sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing. His father Isaac asked him, who are you? I am your son, he answered, your firstborn Esau. Isaac trembled violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him. And indeed, he will be blessed. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me too, my father. You can see both of the sons desperate for this. But he said, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. His hands are tied. Esau said, isn't he rightly named Jacob? He has deceived me these 2 times. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. Then he asked, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? Isaac answered Esau, I have made him lord over you, and I've made all his relatives his servants. I have sustained him with grain and new wine. What can I possibly do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. Then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, your dwelling will be away from earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword and you will serve your brother, but when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke off from your neck. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I will send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I am disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from the Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living. Sort of an abrupt end there, but we sort of get a taste. This is Rebekah's new plan to protect Jacob. She's going to send him away. So how does the chapter end? How does the story end? Happily ever after? No. Nobody wins. Nobody gets a happily ever after in this story. Isaac's plan to bless his favorite son gets foiled. He pours out all his blessing on his least favorite son. Rebekah's plan goes south because her favorite son, she now has to send away. And by the way, once Jacob leaves to her brother in Haran, to Laban, she will never see him again. Her deception, her plotting and planning leads to her never being able to see her favorite son again alive. Esau is now in a place where he is taking comfort in the thought of murdering his brother, his twin brother. He says, when the days of mourning for my father are near, what he's saying is, the second my father dies, I'm gonna kill my brother. That's when the thought of murder is a comforting thought, that's a dark place to be. That's not a happily ever after. And Jacob, after all this maneuvering and pretending and plotting and scheming, receiving the firstborn blessing, the thing that should have made everything happily ever after, now has to leave. He has to walk 500 miles away from the security of that blessing. He was so desperate for the security of that blessing, he has to leave it all behind to go into an unknown place. The pretending that he did, Jacob's pretending, it got him the blessing he wanted, but it left him feeling so much worse, and he was so much worse off for it. And I don't know about you, but this is a haunting story for me to read. This is a haunting story because this is not some strange tale of ridiculous disguises and unrelatable people that happened thousands of years ago. The story of Jacob is the story of me. I am Jacob. You are Jacob. All of us here have been in that place before. All of us are just as desperate for blessing and security as Jacob is. Deep down inside, all of us just desperately, desperately want the blessing of security in our lives. If I can just get this thing, then my life will be taken care of and I will be okay. All we want is to just be okay, and we'll be willing to do whatever it takes to get it. We pretend we're insecure, and so we pretend to get the blessing, whatever the thing is that we want. In big ways and small ways, we pretend to get it. Who here flosses every day? Maybe you see where I'm going with this. There's a few hands. You got better dental hygiene than me. I'll give it to you. Who here definitely flosses like the few days before their dentist appointment? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we got some liars and some honest people in the room. Okay. The blessing of a dental hygienist means nothing in the grand scheme of things, but we want it. And so we will pretend to have better dental hygiene than we really do. We will pretend to be somebody we're not in a small way to get the approval of a stranger. It's not ridiculous. But we do it in bigger ways than that. We will, like I said before, maybe you want to fit in at school, or maybe you want to fit in at your job, and so you'll wear certain clothes that you don't, it's itchy, it's uncomfortable. You will talk maybe a little bit differently. I've been guilty of this before. I will actually, I went to college for a few years in the South, and then I finished my education in California. And so I would find myself sometimes almost speaking with a accent. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm pretending so that these people will accept me. We do this. Maybe you're in a career that you don't even like. You're working a job that you can't stand because you think zeros in your bank account will make you feel like your life is okay, or that having letters after your name will give you people's approval, and then your life will be set. And so you are willing to pretend to be a person who, you'll pretend to be a scientist when you don't even really like science, because scientists, people respect. And don't we do this with God too? Don't we come to church and we put on our nice clothes and we wear our good shoes and we get here early and maybe we'll say a prayer before service and we'll say, God, look at me. I got here on time. I'm raising my hands in worship. And I know I'm not a perfect person. I know I don't do everything right, but I'm really pretty good, right? Will you bless me? Will you give me this blessing? I really have this situation I need your help with. Will you bless me? Maybe some of you literally were screaming at each other in the car on the way over here today. I know in my church, I know there's probably some people that were doing that on the way home, to church today. And as soon as you get out, the door of the car closes, door of the church opens, all smiles. Good morning. Good to see you. Praise God. Blessed to be here today. You want people to approve of you. You're pretending. But the thing is, we learn this in this story, we learn this in life, but this is a lesson that's hard to really internalize, and so I hope you can track with me. So long as we pretend in order to get blessing, pretending in order to get blessing never provides the security that we're hoping for. As long as we're willing to be somebody else, as long as we're willing to put on a disguise and get the thing that we're after, it's never gonna provide you the thing that you're hoping you're gonna get from it. It's gonna turn sour in your mouth. That promotion that you worked so hard to do, you stepped on other people to get there, you took credit for things. As soon as you get it, you realize, I don't deserve this promotion. If my boss knew what I did to get here, if he knew what happened behind this door, he wouldn't have given it to me. It belongs to that person. So you don't even get to taste the satisfaction of it. Not only that, but blessings that are acquired through sort of deceitful means, they always have strings attached, don't they? They always have, consider this. If you got a boyfriend, you really wanted to win the heart of this or that person, desperately wanted their love, and so you found out that this person, they love country music. And that is like your worst nightmare. You can't stand country music, but you want them so bad that you go for it. You pretend. You say, yes, yeah, let's go to a country concert. Let's go see, I don't even know any country bands, but let's go see them. And maybe it works out. Maybe you guys get together. How long are you gonna keep that up? The blessing has strings attached. You're gonna have to keep going with this lie and keep suffering through country music every time you get in the car. Because if you tell them the truth, what are they gonna do? So if we want this blessing so bad, and the only way that we can see to get it is by pretending to be somebody else, but when that happens, it never pans out for us, and we never win, there's no happily ever after, what do? What are we supposed to do? When you get to that place where you recognize that if my boss knew the real me, if my new boyfriend or girlfriend or this group of friends or whoever, if God knew the real me, I would lose everything. My career would be taken from me maybe. My family might be taken from me. I could end up with nothing. Brothers and sisters, we need to make our way to that place this morning. We need to be honest with ourselves and make our way to that place this morning in that chair, because from that place is the perfect place to view, to see the beauty, the stunning beauty of the gospel. When we come to the end of ourselves and realize we don't deserve any blessing, if anyone knew the real us, that all of the good things of our lives would just be sucked out. When we get there and we look at the gospel, we can finally see the real beauty that's there. Because our Father, our Heavenly Father, does not have terrible eyesight. We come before our Heavenly Father. He does not get fooled by our ridiculous disguises. And you see what Jacob says, if he finds out, he's gonna curse me. And we serve a God, the God of the universe, who sees through all of that in an instant and closes the distance, right? He comes right up to us. There's nothing protecting us. You're in that place, you realize, I don't deserve anything. In the moment that God should call a curse down on you, your father should curse you for trying to trick him or for trying to earn this in whatever way, you sort of close your eyes and brace for impact and whatever comes next. He does something astonishing. That father wraps his arms around you. He embraces you, he pulls you close, and he whispers something in your ear. He says, "You are my son. You are my daughter." And he says this, "I love you and I like you. I love you and I like you." When Jesus gets baptized, the Spirit of the Lord descends in the form of a dove, and there's a voice that gets heard. And what God says to Jesus in that moment is he says, "This is my son. I love him and I like him." And this is the gospel, that when we come to Jesus, when we come to God, we come before him, we see through our disguises, however you come. Maybe you come with it on, maybe you come exposed. In the very moment where he should strike you down, he embraces you, he shows you love, and what do we see Jesus doing? The true firstborn son, the one who deserves the blessing. The Bible talks a lot about this moment. 2 Corinthians 5, it says that he who knew no sin became sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. In Galatians 3, it says that Christ redeemed us from the curse by becoming a curse for us, so that we might receive the blessing of the Spirit. A few verses later in chapter 4, it says that those who put their faith in Jesus are sons and daughters of God. Do you see what's happening here? Jesus, he picks up our clothes and he starts to put them on. He puts on our disguise. He dresses up like us and he goes there. He becomes the curse that we deserved. He becomes the sin that prevented us from getting God's blessing, so that we could become firstborn sons and daughters. In Hebrews, it calls the church, I love this phrase. In Hebrews, it says the church is the church of the firstborn. You think about this idea. How could it be possible that there's a family and every child is the firstborn child? Every son and daughter, firstborn, gets all of the Father's love, gets all of the blessing. That's what we get in Jesus. So what now? What do? We're in that place, we're in that seat, we witness the gospel, we see the beauty of it. I think all of us have something that we need to do in this moment. All of us have something that we need to respond to. All of us need to come as we are to the gospel. And this is the big idea. This is what I want you to take away from today. God's blessing, the gospel, it invites us to stop striving for his love and to start living because of it. To start living because of God's love. The gospel invites us to stop striving for God's love and to start living because of it. And so I'm gonna invite the team back up as we get ready to close and worship, and I just wanna invite you to do one of two things. If you're here, maybe you got dragged here. Maybe you're not sure about this whole Jesus thing, and you have your doubts and your questions. If that's you, I want to invite you to take this seat. It's a metaphorical seat, so don't come pretend sitting here. But come before God. Try it out. come as you are. Say, God, I don't deserve anything, but I know that I need something. I need something because I know that my life is not okay. And maybe you need to just come up front and kneel and pray and do that business with God. Feel that embrace from a Father whose love you've been desperately looking for in so many different places. Maybe you're here and you already have accepted Christ. You've already experienced that moment. You've already experienced that embrace, but you've left your Father's presence. You know, maybe you leave church, you know, Monday comes around, Tuesday comes around, and it's just so familiar to put that disguise back on. It's just so familiar to continue to live that lie, to pretend to be the person you're not. And you know what it is. If you're honest with yourself, you know the places where you're pretending and still seeking after somebody else's blessing when you've already received the blessing of the Father. And so if that's you, I also invite you to come up. Maybe you can do it in your seats. Maybe you need to come up and do that business with God. You need to come back before him and say, Lord, I'm sorry. You need to rest in his embrace. You need to rest in that phrase that he whispers in your ear. I love you and I like you. And that should be enough. Jesus is enough for all of us. In Hebrews 10, it tells us that we can draw near to God with a sincere heart. So draw near to God this morning with a sincere heart. And don't swerve. It says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. Don't swerve left or right. Don't put your disguises back on. Stay on this path. Be sincere in your life. Watch what the blessing of the Father can do for you. I just want to close in prayer. A prayer that I wrote a few weeks ago in my time with the Lord. And maybe this can minister to you, and maybe this can be your prayer. And there will be people up here, leaders, who are more than happy to pray with you. So will you join me in praying? Dear Lord, thank you for your word. It brings me to my knees, for I know that I am a wretched sinner, and nothing I can do will change that. For I am so undeserving of your grace. I was your enemy. I was trying to trick you into giving me what I wanted, but you disarmed me with a word. You threw off all my devices and disguises. You closed the distance so that there was nothing between us, and at the moment where you should have struck me down, you embraced me. You threw your arms around me and said, you are my son, and I love you, and I like you. Oh, Father, how I melted into that embrace. Pure love washed over me, and I was overcome in the sanctity of that moment. In your arms, a vile and broken sinner was reborn into a child of God. My life ended and began anew when I laid down my disguise and heard you say those words. And now nothing can be the same, for I am not the same. Before I was striving for your love, but now I am striving from your love. Not only do I strive to know you more, but I strive to share that life-changing love with others. For there is still room at your table, and you still have more love to give. Oh Lord, may you use me to share your message to future sons and daughters, that they might feel your embrace just as I have. I love you, Lord. Amen.